Hey nerds, we are talking about Miss Marvel episode 4, Seeing Red. We are going to give our reviews of the episode and then get into a breakdown of the episode starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Soul Show. I am Nathan.
Hi, I'm Priya.
And I'm Colin.
Hey, so if you're watching this in replay, you can get the chapter information down below if you want to just jump to the breakdown, or it's over there. All right, so actually over there. All right, so the spoiler free description of this episode provided to us by Disney is Kamala travels around the world to solve the mystery of the bangle and her family's history. So, Priya, what did you think of this episode?
The log line clearly says like we get a new location, and it's around the world. We kind of get a mini spoiler there, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think it's look, we've said it so many times. Like the charm of the show is so much around the culture, the history, the family, the community. Yes, it's a superhero show, but to me, really, like the best moments of the show are really the family moments and the cultural moments. And so again, this episode kind of continues to build that. I have to say they do a lot of world building and they continue to go into like the mythology in parallel with the historic and cultural events. And I have to give kudos that they're really able to maintain that balance really well, throughout this season so far. So I think the core charm of the show is still there. There's a little bit of odd kind of scenes, and we can get into that when we go into the spoiler breakdown. But overall, I think it was a pretty action packed episode in terms of there's a lot that happens. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It's still kind of stuck to their themes of colorful and cultural and historic, and really going into topics that I think for the first time are being done in a mainstream way, and definitely for the MCU. So just yeah, I think it was a really interesting episode from that aspect.
Yeah. Colin, what'd you think?
Yeah, I agree with Priya in a lot of ways. I think that it was definitely a lot of cultural aspects of it that were incorporated into this episode. A lot more than I expected, because I thought that they would, because of from last week's episode, you thought, well, they're going to go into the MCU. They're going to make it all comic book and MCU eyes it, action packed and all that. But they really did lean into the cultural aspects of it. And like in tagline that you just mentioned, they are going to another country. I just wonder, it's very interesting whether or not they did film there or not. That would be something that we'll see hopefully in in those Marvel assembled series that they have behind the scenes and things like that. Hopefully they do show a little bit in terms of how they did it. But it was a lot more than I expected in a good way. And overall, I just felt that definitely that the story just kept moving along in many ways, and there were some secrets that were revealed, which was great. But overall, I think it was definitely much more of the family oriented cultural aspects than I thought it would be, because of what was set up from last week.
Okay. I think this episode was pretty much on par with the last episode for me, which, means that it was a pretty good episode for me, but also it had some weaknesses, and we can get into that. Some of the things that Priya pointed out, some of the scenes were a little bit odd to me. But it also means that it wasn't as good as the first two episodes for me again, because of those weaknesses. I do appreciate the historical things that they're getting into. I don't know if they're balancing it as well as I would like. And it might be because of some of those clunkier scenes that I was talking about. I sort of appreciate what they're doing, or why they're doing it. I mean, they got all this Disney / Marvel money, and they're probably not going to get another large stage like this to talk about some of these issues. But I don't know if they integrated them as well as they could have in this episode. Also, the villains continue to be like duds to me. in the show. They're like the least interesting part of the show. Whenever they show up, whenever they show up, it's not great. I will say that the villains in this episode were better than the previous episode. So the reason that I would give this episode a 7.5, isn't all down to the villains, whereas in the previous episode it was mostly the villain issue. But yeah, they still don't seem very compelling to me. And again, I know they couldn't do a parrot with Ben Franklin's brain, but I feel like they should have come up with some better foil for her to deal with. And I understand they're trying to weave it into her backstory a little bit to make it a little bit more significant. But yeah, they the way that they rendered them, the way that they show their powers, it's a little CW-ish sometimes, which is not what you want, not what you want from a Marvel property. Yeah. So that's my main issue with this episode. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think that the villain part is something that they've struggled with ever since the beginning. I mean they've had some moments, Killmonger being one of them, probably the best one, but
they've gotten better at villains, I think, though. Yeah. I mean, so my issue isn't not just they're weakly written, because they are weakly written, and that was a phase 1 issue. My issue is that they're weakly rendered as well. At least they spent money on like CGI for like Yellow Jacket, and they spent money on CGI for like Ironmonger and stuff like that. They're not spending any money on them. They seem very, very weak, and not compelling. At least those villains, is terrible and kind of one note in kind of mustache twirling as they were. They were at least interesting to watch because of how they were rendered on screen, and I don't think Marvel has spent as much money rendering their powers as they have in the past. That's my main issue with the villains.
I think you're right in a way, also because they've strayed so much from the comic book material in terms of even Miss Marvel's powers and the source of it. And so the clandestines, even in the comic books, they're not really that prevalent. There was a lot of issues with them, from what I was reading, just in terms of like they were deemed as kind of racists and all of this.
It's mostly white people in the comics. Yeah.
It's a very kind of troubling comic book series that I know why they put it in, because they're called Jinn, so they just wanted to make some connection with Miss Marvel. But I think you're right, like how they kind of have woven in the story is just so weak, and it continues to be the weakest part of the show. It just seems so forced in a way, and trying to create these stakes, because you need a villain, I suppose, in a Marvel universe. But it is the weakest part of the show by far. And yes, they do a little bit better this episode, but it's still not the most compelling part.
I mean, it's only a little bit better because they show off her powers better. Like, I don't think anything that they do is particularly interesting, but how she responds to them with her powers, that's interesting. I think part of that sequence goes on a little bit longer than it should, but it starts off very, very well. So it's not just their interaction with her isn't as bad as it was in the previous episode, and doesn't drag down the episode as much as it did in the previous episode. But it's still not great. I mean, at this point, it's not like they can dispense with them in the next couple episodes. But I'm not really interested in what happens to them going forward. But I'm sure they'll feature at some point. Maybe they can diminish how much they feature. So the other thing is that this episode, I think this episode may suffer from the thing that the last episode did. It's kind of written by committee. There's so many writers on this episode, whereas the first 2 episodes just had one writer. We have another director as well, and I think she does a good job with this. Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. I'm probably pronouncing her last name Sharmeen. I think it's the writing. Like the we can talk about the particular scenes where you said where you Priya thought that they were a little clunky, but I think there are definitely some scenes in here that I think could have been cut, and also and unfortunately some actors that probably shouldn't have been cast because they're not good actors. So some of the actors that she interacts with when she gets to Pakistan. So yeah, and yeah, we can get into the specifics of that when we get to the breakdown. But yeah, I mean, usually I'm trying to explain why I'm not giving it as high a rating as before. So I'm listing a bunch of problems, but I did like a lot of the episode, and we can get into the specifics of what I did like in the episode when we get into it. But I mean, but generally, I did like the scene change. I like what they did, trying to show off Pakistan, trying to show off Karachi. I like some of the cultural stuff that they delve into. But like I said, I think the balance is a little bit off because either they needed to lean into it more or not, or skip over some of that stuff for later on, maybe a season 2. So yeah. That's my general thoughts about the episode. You guys have any other thoughts about the episode before we?
Yeah, I think one thought before we get into spoilers is that, do you think that the world building is the part where they want to really emphasize, and then like they put all of their eggs in one basket in terms of the world building, in terms of the cultural sensitivities and then the cultural significances, so that they kind of like downplay the villain of that of this series, so it's like it's not as significant, so that us fans are kind of in a good way be overwhelmed with the cultural significance of the show.
Well, I think there's a couple issues. For one, so the other part of this conversation is about the fact that apparently people aren't watching the show in as high numbers as previous Marvel shows, and I think there is something to be said about the audience themselves and what the issues with the audience and their willingness to watch something after the protagonist isn't a white person. But but I also feel like this is partly Disney's fault as well. There was no reason whatsoever to put this head to head with Obi-Wan. That like they shouldn't have had it drop on the same day. Even people who were covering it like us on the internet, we had to wait the next day because it takes a fair amount of effort to cover something the day of, and two things at the same time is difficult. So even channels with a lot more resources than we have were covering Miss Marvel the next day, and people might get to it, maybe people might not get to it. So building hype around the show is difficult if it's competing with another property that's dropping the same day. Also, I think that they should have interconnected some of the other things that are happening in the MCU in addition to the Pakistani history stuff, so that people could talk about it more on a regular basis. They mention stuff because she's a fangirl, but like Kango was mentioned, he should probably show up in the show, and people would have talked about that. Like, so like that I think part of it is the audience, part of it is like Disney's decision or Marvel Studios' decision to that hampered the show, or is hampering the show. I mean, I hope people find it, because it's a great, on balance, it's a great show. And I think that what's coming up is going to be really interesting based upon how it ended. And also the final episode is actually going to be directed by the guys who directed the first episode. I'm a little concerned that the final episode is also written by a committee, but the next episode is actually written by one person. So maybe it'll be also good. I don't know what the mix, the alchemy there is. But yeah, I think that there are a couple issues that are causing this show not to be as popular as it could be, and I think part of it is, like I said, Marvel's fault. Because
Yeah, but I think I think you're onto something, Colin, right? Because I think one part is this is an MCU show, so as fans of the MCU, you have
Yeah.
certain expectations, like Nathan is saying, to have connections to the MCU. But at another point, they're leaning so heavily into the cultural and the historic world building, which
Hmm.
hasn't been done before. But if you think about Moon Knight, they didn't really
Not
connect it that much to the MCU
No, no.
at all, actually. Again, they mentioned it, but it's not like you saw anybody from the
Right.
MCU really come in. So I think they're trying something new with these kind of cultural stories, first with Moon Knight and now with Miss Marvel, where they're leaning heavily into the cultural and historical significance and the weight that these stories carry from that point of view, which is a fresh take because in the comics, at least for Miss Marvel, they don't lean so heavily into her Pakistani culture and faith. And from what I've seen, it's been a really welcome
yeah.
take from fans, even of the comic books. But I think because of the MCU world, you're right, Nathan, because it's like you expect certain things from that. But I'm not sure if that was questioned as much with Moon
Well,
Knight as
I
it is
think
with
Moon
Miss
Knight.
Marvel.
I think you're right. I think they weren't necessarily the Moon Knight wasn't I mean, unless you count learning about Egyptology as educational, it didn't have necessarily as much of an
Yeah.
educational focus as the show does. I'm trying to teach about partition and also the culture of that part of the world. I think you get a little bit of highlights of Egypt because the showrunner is Egyptian.
Mhm.
So you get a different view of Egypt that's not as stereotypical as it usually is, and you definitely get that when we visit Karachi. But I don't think that there are as many deep dives
Yeah.
into Egyptian culture, like modern Egyptian culture. There's a lot of deep dives into like ancient Egyptian culture um,
Mhm.
in that show, and and I think people are probably more receptive to that. Unfortunately, they don't necessarily they're not necessarily as interested as in what's going on in our current world. So if that show decided to go into why Egypt is the way it is. I don't know. Maybe if it decided to delve into say the Egyptian Israeli war, something like that. I think
Oh,
that
that would
that
be,
would have
yeah,
lost. That probably would
a
have
lot.
lost people. So, um, yeah, and again, I appreciate that they actually are going into partition and they're really leaning into it, but they probably should have peppered in some of the other MCU stuff to get people to just show up. So that they actually because my concern is that they're spending a lot of time on this stuff, but I'm not a lot of people are going to actually get the lesson because they're not showing up. Like I
Mhm.
think people should learn about this stuff. and should know about this stuff. So you have this you tease them with this shiny thing over here, and they're getting a lesson basically about things that they should probably know about, because you should know about what's happening in the world. But like
Yeah.
but they're not showing up, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I mean, it's interesting because now you kind of see like Black Panther being even more amazing because Ryan Coogler was able to do both. I mean,
Hmm.
he was able to do both in a way where it was transcendent in a lot of ways. So so it has been done in the past. So we'll see.
Hmm.
We'll see. I mean, it's definitely different mediums, but at the same time, you just based on what Marvel's done in the past. I mean, Black Panther is just like right up there in terms of this, like the pinnacle of the world building, the culture, and also just like the different historical contexts, and as well as just about a very compelling villain, in a way.
Yeah.
So it's like that's like the perfect storm of everything that happens, and I think that maybe that yes, Ms. Marvel does suffer from some of the villain stuff not being as compelling
Hmm.
and not connecting to the MCU and stuff like that. But yeah, it has been done before, and maybe they are trying to reach that level. But yeah, it just again speaks to the brilliance of that movie and Ryan Coogler as well.
Yeah. I think we should probably delve into some of the breakdown stuff. We've been
Yeah,
talking non-spoiler stuff for like 21 minutes. It is interesting as it is for us. People want to actually probably hear about the specifics of the episode. So, If you're enjoying the conversation, even though we've been talking longer than usual, we want you to join the conversation by commenting down below. Like, subscribe, we really appreciate it. Share as well, that also helps out. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the summer, so we can give you more content like this, and we appreciate it. All right, so spoilers ahead. Go see the episode. All right. All right, so where do you guys want to start? We had that scene on the airplane, because last week I was saying that it's going to be a bit of a challenge for her to actually get her mother to travel. And they start the show basically on them with them on a plane, which was a little jarring to me. But then I thought about it a little bit, and I think they basically, especially with the scenes that they have, her mother has with her grandmother later on. I think basically they were communicating, and they communicated in this scene as well. Despite the uneasy relationship that she has with her mother, she's an immigrant, and she and a lot of there's a lot of reverence for elders in immigrant communities, right? So her mother asked her to come. Her mother's getting old, so she came. I think that's probably fine. That's a fine explanation for me. It might not be an explanation that makes sense to like an American who was born here, but like
we're all both of us are nodding with you, Nathan.
So
it definitely resonates.
So yeah, and I think when I was saying it would probably be a challenge, I was thinking more like an American and less like a child of immigrants. So yeah, I think the reverence for parents is there, and that's why she made the trip.
But they do it out of guilt too sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Muniba, it kind of shows that despite all of the tension that's been building, at the end of the day, Muniba still values her mother and being a daughter and her home, right? Because that's what I was saying before, like home and identity at the core every single episode, and it's not just with it's not just with Kamala. You can see that with Muniba, right, about her home and how she defines her identity. And then you see that even with Sana, her grandmother, where she has this really emotional conversation with Kamala on identity. And I think, I think that it's kind of great to see the 3 generations of Khan women all somewhat struggling with identity. And, it's also a nice message that you don't have to kind of figure it out, and kind of put that bullseye in of how you define yourself. But yeah, I think it was interesting. I thought of you, Nathan, when we were having that conversation, and they called it a temporary truce so that they can go to Pakistan. And I also chuckled when everybody got up to get their luggage out of the bins before it landed, because that happens almost every flight. You don't get off
any sooner. It's annoying to everyone. I don't know why people do it. But yeah, yeah, but yeah, and this guy asks her a question, and then gets very annoyed by them very quickly, very quickly. We also see in the scene that Nakia is not responding to her, and that's really the only nod that we get in this episode to Nakia. We don't get anything really with Bruno, except for later on in the episode, she's starting to develop her own identity and uses Bruno's mask instead of a Miss Marvel mask. So I guess that's a little bit of a nod to Bruno in this episode, but we don't really get any communication to Bruno in this episode. I think this is pretty much an all brown episode. I don't think any white people show up in this episode.
Yeah, I mean the clandestines, I think, are probably, except for Najma, probably the only non-brown.
I don't know. I thought everyone on that team was brown.
No, well, wait, hold on. Is it? I don't think so. I think there's at least one white guy.
No. So what? I mean, one of so black or brown. I thought everyone on that team was either black or brown. Is that not the case?
Yeah. I just wasn't sure about I thought the dude that was with the curly hair that was singing popcorn last time.
I thought he. Okay.
Yeah, maybe he is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe he's just light skinned brown. It's fine.
But yeah, that's the first. I think that's definitely a first. Even in Black Panther, they had the token white guy. So, so yeah. Um, so yeah, and then
And I think the Nakia and Bruno thing was on purpose in a way just to completely alienate Kamala and put her 100% in this context of Karachi, right? Because she's somewhat
right.
of she's super excited, but she's a fish out of water. Um, it's without that support system, how does she kind of land on her feet? And I think like she's actually found herself in the fight scenes as we see. I was very impressed. I was like, huh,
Yeah.
she's really kind of
Yeah.
come into her own with some of the, you know, like her moves. And I love I have to once again, I know we say it every episode, but my
Yeah,
God,
she's great.
Iman Vellani has
So
She's great.
been like just phenomenal. Like even her expressions of
Yeah,
surprise with the move is amazing. I mean,
yeah,
she's just so
she's
good.
great in
So
the
so
role.
good.
I like this whole scene. I mean, again, very familiar stuff. I mean, it's not gonna hit everyone the same way, but like I mean, I don't come from my family doesn't
the
come from a
foreign cousins.
developing country, but it comes from like a middle income country. So just like the craziness at the airport, and all the commotion is just it's very familiar to me. I just love this opening scene here. Um, not just for all the commotion, all the colors and everything, but also the grandmother. She comes in. She's a great actress. She definitely exudes like warmth. Um, I wasn't sure how they were going to have her play because we only seen her on the phone and in the previous episodes, and she just added too close to her face. But I feel like they were just making a comment about the fact that older people sometimes have issues with phones. Honestly, my mother has issues sometimes with with the phone as well, putting not having the right angle. So yeah, she's awesome. I mean, Kamala mentions her bangles. She says, well, they're old, but you can have them. It's like it probably wasn't even what she was saying, but just how giving she is. You get all of that in this scene. It's a beautiful scene.
Yeah. Well, speaking of grandmothers, I mean, from other Disney properties, you know that it's like the wise old grandma, but they didn't go down that. They didn't go down that trope, which was really really good. They kind of made her to be a little bit different from that. Like, oh, it's supposed to be like this tension between mom and the daughter, and then the grandmother. The grandmother's supposed to be more defiant, more adventurous, more kind of rebellious. But then they kind of twisted it in a way. Later on, you'll see that Kamal's mom was much more of a rebel too. It's like in
Yeah.
her own way. So
Yeah.
like you said,
Mhm.
Priya, in those three generations, each one of them have their own kind of identities, and they sometimes clash. And that's true for many immigrant families, in the United States, where you have the generational clash and stuff like that. And even the title is kind of Disney-esque, because it's kind of similar to Turning Red, in some
Seeing
ways.
red. Yeah.
Yeah, you've seen Turning Red. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that mother-daughter divide, and how the mom was very had her own trauma and her own kind of generational divide with her mother. So there's a lot of that type of thing going there, but it was still compelling, and they made it different. It wasn't like the wise grandmother from Moana or from Pocahontas. Not like that, which was really refreshing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. The other so there other so like this scene is packed in like after I watched it this morning, I actually rewatched it and started rating individual scenes because I knew that I had a less than great experience with the entire episode. I mean, it was good, but not great. This scene is great. The only issues that I have with the scene specifically is these cousins. I think the girl is okay in this scene. I like her. The guy cannot act, and he's annoying. Uh, but I do like like one thing that is familiar to me is like when you go home, which is what immigrants sometimes say when they're going back to the country where they're from. When you go home, sometimes people meet you at the airport, and you only see them at the airport, and then they go away. So that's also something that happens. So I like that. But it's just that these two actors, like the guy specifically, cannot act, and it was a little it was a little annoying.
But he made a nice comment about that little comment about being an ABCD, which was funny
yes,
to me.
that later on that
Yeah.
is a interesting comment. If it was delivered by someone else, it would have been even more interesting. Like, yeah.
Oh, boy.
It's such a comment though that like has so much weight to immigrants who then go back, immigrants who've been living abroad
Yes,
for generations
absolutely.
and then go back home, you know. Um, there's always that, and ABCD was something I heard so much, not me personally, but around me I heard it so much. So it's just kind of like, and you can see it, right? That's going to be a theme with lots of immigrants. Talked about this with Nakia as well. You kind of have 1 foot here, 1 foot there, and you're kind of this in between always. So yeah, I think, but yeah, I agree, Nathan. I think the grandmother is great, and I also agree, Colin, that the way that they've portrayed her, it's yes, she obviously knows a lot of things because eventually she also kind of shares more about the bangle or the history very, very casually, but she's not supposed to kind of be this all-knowing with all the answers. And that's why I love that line that she says about identity being like, I haven't figured out yet,
Yeah.
and I have time to do so, which I think was so refreshing to kind of hear from somebody that typically you would, especially in Disney, like you said, is supposed to be the person you go to for all the answers. So I kind of like that part of it.
every scene she's in. She sort of owns the scene,
Yeah.
even though like other people are great, like Amon, but like she like her scene with her daughter, the scene with Kamala later on. She's awesome. Also, I finally saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, and this at the very end of this conversation when she mentions that her daughter's skin is dry, just the immigrant thing of like kind of negging your child like to show that you love them. Yeah,
There's going to be a poke.
Yeah.
There has to be a poke.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But that's love. That is the love.
It's funny when you say that, Priya, because as immigrants, I tell people sometimes like, in the United States, in the United States, people that have living families that live in the United States, they express love and be affectionate in many different ways. But in terms of my culture, Asian culture, you don't express love the way that some people do in the United States. And it's like, and I mentioned that to friends that they do it through food, but they also do it, like you said, Priya, to like they poke you in some ways. That's the type of love that they show. It's not the affection, it's not the hugs or the kisses or anything like that. No, it's not any of that. That is what it is. Is that type of, and it's very interesting to kind of see that in the Disney property. It's really interesting. I just find that type, they know all our secrets now. It's like, is that a good or a bad thing?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So after this scene, we get a bit of a tour around Karachi. So I think they shot most of this in Indonesia. So these are mostly all drone shots that they purchased. But it's still nice to see the city as beautifully represented as it is here. So yeah, and you also get a bit of a nice little I guess little moment between them in the car here as well before we get the title sequence also. Yeah, and then they get to the house. The house is big. It's like a compound.
Yeah.
And you also get I mean, the guy on the plane asks if this is her first time, but you get a hint here that this isn't her first time. She's been to this house a few times, but like, or at least she's been here more than once because she knows the dog. But it was obviously when she was smaller because she forgot that the house was so big. It's a big house. Yeah.
It is. And that might be just because of like traditionally, especially in South Asian cultures, you sometimes have multi-generational households. And so houses do sometimes tend to be big because you have, lots of families living there. So that could have been the case for all we know with this. But it's a beautiful house. And I almost wish the
Yeah.
name of the dog was Lockjaw, again, because of the comics. I don't know. I have a picture of him up because I wanted to bring that point up. I mean, look at him. Where is he? He's like it's
Right.
a very, it's
Yeah.
supposed to be like her celestial guide, Miss Marvel's
Yeah.
celestial guide, and he's like this giant bulldog. So it would have been like very like a cute little
I
cheeky
think they,
thing if they
I think
called
they
him
still don't
Lockjaw and
know what
made him
they're
like
gonna
a
do with the
bulldog. But
Inhumans, so they maybe they have that on the side, and maybe she'll have a
yeah,
relationship with the real Lockjaw. Although, I mean, that show wasn't great in a lot of different ways, but they actually Lockjaw looked pretty good in that show. I'm not sure if you remember. Um, okay,
I ne- I never watched
yeah,
Inhumans,
it was
but I
mostly
heard mixed things about it.
the writing, some of the CGI, but I think the Lockjaw looked. I mean, he was a giant dog. I mean, like he looked good. So they
Yeah.
can definitely do him again. So I think Marvel still has to figure out what they're going to do with the Inhumans. If they're going to do anything with the Inhumans, they're kind of an important part of the Marvel universe. So yeah, but hopefully we'll get a real Lockjaw later on.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is. Uh, I think right after this, we get the scene with her grandmother, where, as you said, Colin, she doesn't have all the answers, and she kind of embraces the journey and kind of says,
Hmm.
sometimes Kamala says that she's trying to put the piece of a puzzle, put together a puzzle, and the pieces keep breaking or something like that,
Yeah.
and her grandmother's wisdom here is that sometimes those pieces are the best part. So yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, she doesn't have all the answers for her, but I think she does give her a kind of wisdom here, in this conversation. And also you can see, as you said, Colin, she's searching herself, like trying to piece together her own life because of the disruption that partition
Hmm.
caused in her life. So
Right.
she's a very artistic person. She has like these clippings on the wall. She's painting
Hmm.
remembrances of her mother.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's I love this entire room, and I love this I love this conversation. I
Yeah.
wanted to spend more time in this room.
Also, I also like the parallel that they try and make between Kamala and Sana, to the
Yeah,
fact that she's also an artist, she's also a storyteller, and that's kind of how they open the show
Yeah.
with
right.
Kamala and her YouTube channel, right? I mean, Kamala has obviously kind of inherited a lot of qualities from her grandma. Yes, the Jin factor, but also a lot about art. And I think it was a great way also to just, again, we've talked about how much they lean into the partition,
Hmm.
and there is a lot of heartbreak, right? I mean, like up to 2 million
Right.
people died and 20 million people got displaced, right? And just the way like they kind of are so raw about the emotion and the pain and the hurt, around that, and are so open to kind of being like, yeah, the British colonizers really
Hmm.
left the Indian subcontinent in a mess. And just hearing some of that and seeing it so vividly depicted, in a show that's supposed to be like mainstream and MCU, I really did kind of find that almost kind of a bit radical for Marvel, to be honest. Talking about, the topic. I mean, it's great because you don't get to hear about that much, in this kind of media. But yeah, I just think that the art parallel was great with the grandma, and then obviously her
Yeah.
casualness of being like, yeah, I'm a Jin,
Yeah.
so are
I mean,
you. That was great
there
as well.
you I did write down the note about this scene because her mother in the first episode says this is my genetics, and she says genetics here as well. I'm not sure if it's genetics are very important to her and her family specifically. She's like, yeah, that's just genetics. Um, but yeah, it's interesting how she's very kind of blasé about it. Which is a little weird, but it also adds to her character in the way that she sees the world, I guess. So yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know anything else from this scene. I forget if there's any
Just
other.
before she showed the picture of her mother, she said that she only had one black and white picture with her father when she was very, very small.
Yeah.
I again find that very interesting because a lot of times when you have grandmothers, grandfathers, they lose things. That's a very powerful story for many different types of people because family lineages get lost, things get lost, people get displaced. That's what happens, and so that's very pointed as well in a lot of ways, and this is not just about her culture, it's about all of us that have experienced that, in many different aspects of our world. So I just find it very good that you're able to kind of put that in here as well in this context. And I think that's the thing that I don't quite understand with some fans is that you can still take a little bit of each of these parts of someone's culture and then just say, wow, I can relate to that. And,
right.
I think that's where some fans get very narrow-minded and think, oh, it's someone else's culture. It's not relevant to me. No,
right.
It can be relevant to you if you open your eyes a little bit and open your mind a little bit. There could be some parallels that you can see in your own lives as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the next scene after this is not that interesting because it's mostly just flashbacks to what happened in the previous episode, and it's flashing back to the most boring part of the episode, basically the gin fight. So we can skip to the next morning when she falls because she's jet lagged and she's doing stuff and then she passes out basically. I don't understand. So this scene is okay because we understand a little bit more about Muniba in this scene, and they also kind of they put in this scene the fact that Kamala has issues with spicy food, which I think is also something from the comics. But like, she was in the car with these people. Why did they tell her not to dress like this? Yeah, I mean, I feel like
not to wear jeans.
I mean, everyone knows that they're not supposed to wear jeans, so why is she wearing jeans? Well, like they could have told her to change before they got there. That didn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah,
you can blame your favorite cousins for that. I think, Nathan, but I think I agree with you. I also found it odd being like, why did nobody tell her? Because she even says she's like, nobody told me about the no jeans policy. I mean, they're obviously trying to make a point with the fish out of water thing. I also agree, like the jeans thing. I was like, that they could have avoided. Maybe a little bit.
They were supposed to meet there, but like she can't get around by herself. So like, yeah, they were all in the car with each other. They would have known the policy, so yeah, it made no sense. But we do get a little bit of, like I said, backstory or insight into her mother, and I think in the first episode, she seemed a little bit one dimensional, and actually one of our colleagues, John, said that like the way that they depicted her was a little triggering for him, but I appreciate that they have deepened her over the episodes, and I actually like her quite a bit now. And as you mentioned, Priya, I'm a little annoyed that her mother and her daughter are kind of keeping her out of the loop. They need to tell her what's going on, because she deserves to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I mean, she might be Jin too, but it just never kind of got. I mean, it never got unlocked, or I mean. I'm skipping ahead, but she has that conversation with her mother, with Sana, about her mother having these like crazy and so you can see she's been deeply hurt by the fact that her mom was out pretty much like telling stories about her Jin life, I guess, or how she got saved. Whereas Muniba holds a lot of that in resentment, even though technically she's Jin too.
I mean, she's probably told her this. She just probably thinks that she's crazy. But she also should probably be communicating to her what's happening right now with her daughter, right? Like her mother or her daughter should be communicating that to her. And you can maybe excuse Kamala because she's a child, but like her mother should probably tell her. Or maybe, I don't know. It's difficult, right? It's possible that she could tell her and she thinks that she won't receive it because she's been telling her that since she was a child, and it's part of the reason she moved away. I don't know. I feel like this could be solved with a lot of these, a lot of shows and movies could be solved with a conversation. Show her the powers, and then they could all be on the same page.
Well,
But
sometimes it's not like that. They're probably trying to show how how real it can be between these conversations may never happen because they'd rather just avoid it. I mean, that's just
yeah,
human nature, don't you think? Because it's just like we all have, in our families, we all have difficult conversations that we don't want to talk about, or we don't want to address or anything like that. I mean, that's pretty relatable in some ways.
maybe I'm more direct than most people. That's why I'm not. Maybe that's why I'm not the most favorite cousin in the family. I'm far more direct than most. I I say the thing that people that should be said sometimes. I don't know. And I get annoyed when I don't see the other people being as direct.
Well,
So
yeah. I mean, we all would like to do that, but I think that there's definitely, I can definitely empathize with the fact with Kamala's mom in a lot of ways, because it's like I don't want to talk about it because I have my own demons, I have my own insecurities or traumas. The fact that her father left her.
yeah,
We mentioned that her father left her
yeah,
while
yeah,
her mother was while her mother was like talking about the gin and stuff like that. She mentioned that, and she's like, I'm traumatized by that in a lot of ways. So it's like,
yeah.
but honestly, people don't talk about that that say those things out loud because and they just kind of repress it in there for many years, and that's typical. That can be
Yeah,
very some families.
and they also might not necessarily have I mean, culturally speaking, might not have the language around talking about it. You just said a lot of things like repressed and traumatized and things like that. And it's not like these notions aren't in other cultures, but I feel like in other cultures, I mean, I'm just speaking about like Barbadian culture. There are therapists in Barbados, but I don't know if people go around talking about their childhood trauma and how they have repressed memories and things like that. It's a very Western, very American way of talking about your past. So
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
Same
yeah.
with Indian culture, I would say. I mean, it's a very different way of thinking, and it's always like the centrality is around family and community, and they show that. But then the whole idea of kind of my feelings and my trauma, you feel it, but is it openly
Oh,
talked about?
Yeah.
not really.
Not
Nope.
really. And certainly not beyond
Yeah.
your immediate family. You might talk about it with your immediate family, but beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Oh yeah,
rare.
absolutely. I mean that's why it did. So, some parts of going. Let's go back to Turning Red. Some parts of it didn't make sense. It's like that doesn't happen because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And I think this is the educational part that you're talking about, Nathan. That I think it's important is that in certain cultures or even in certain cultures that we don't talk about this type of stuff. We don't talk about trauma. We don't go to therapy. We don't do any of this type of stuff. So this is in some ways very groundbreaking because this is these type of complex issues are being addressed in a way where it's okay, it feels safe to talk about it in this medium, but maybe it will inspire others to kind of like, okay, let's open up, let's talk about these type of traumatic issues or repressed issues that happens within a family. And so, yeah, I think that in that regard, it's definitely very groundbreaking. Groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And just one final point on this. I think given all of that context, the show does a really good job of positioning, these strong female characters across three generations that are really trying to like, I'm trying to figure out the word because I don't want to say like hardships, but like they're really trying to fight their way through these
They're trying to navigate
difficulties that they
they're trying to navigate their trauma, trying to navigate their and it's also like generational trauma, right? They're trying to navigate that. So like what happened to her Nani kind of reverberates all the way through Kamala's generation. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they are doing a really great job. I mean, this is probably the most sophisticated thing they've done about family stuff in all the MCU, and because of that, I wish more people were watching it. Yeah, it's great stuff.
It makes Guardians of the Galaxy very surface level, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah,
Or just saying
Yeah,
Thor's
exactly.
crazy
yeah,
family.
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
I think the next scene is another cousin scene, which I feel like could have been cut as well. Just like the flashback, where the flashback to the previous episode could have been cut. Like these things that could have been cut out to make this episode like innate for me. Like I understand that they have this. They're like showing her like the old city and talking about historical things, but it's very short. If it was longer,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it makes sense, but I can understand why it's not longer. Maybe it should have been like in another episode, but like, yeah, the they, I liked the female cousin in every other scene except for this one, and then I started to not like her either. And maybe I liked her in the previous scene because she didn't have as much to say. She had more to say in this. She had more to say in this scene, and I started to dislike her too. But I continue to dislike him. So like, so,
Do you dislike them just because you think they can't act? Is that the
it's the
root of the
delivery.
issue
I
here?
mean, so like if you can
Yeah.
deliver a snarky line and sort of like be deliver a snarky line and be like impish and like you still want to the person is still compelling because the actor can deliver it in that way.
Yeah.
Like they're saying annoying things and he's delivering it in a weird way. Like I mean I definitely dislike him more, but like
Yeah.
some of the things that she says in this scene also it's like okay, what she's like bye. We'll just
Yeah.
see you later. She's like they're leaving her
I
in the middle of
know
this market.
that
Like, you know?
that definitely that definitely confused me because I will say even when I go back home to Delhi, I will not be like, all right, see you later. Let
Yeah,
me figure out my way, and especially not as like, as
yeah.
a 16-year-old or I think 15 or 16. Like that would not have happened. So that kind of took me off guard. I'm like, okay, those are bad cousins to just like leave her in the lurch like that. And I was like, how did she find her way home? And that was the first thing on
Yeah,
my mind. I'm like,
the
just left
the
her there.
episode sort of indicates the last time she was here, she was a small child. So it's not like she knows how to get around the city. It's
And
yeah,
she
and
can't speak the
there's that as well.
language.
That's the other thing that was sticking out to me is like there are people speaking to her in English, but that's not necessarily going to be the case everywhere, right? Like if she gets really lost, she needs to be able to speak to people. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it made no sense whatsoever. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, again, I realize why they're doing it because they're like, again, I think the directors are doing a great job about like showcasing, Pakistani joy, and they're showing like Karachi just like people living
mhm.
and, the street vendors and just so I know why they're doing it, but I agree, Nathan, it was a very odd way of
Yeah,
exiting the
they
cousins
could have
out
cut them
of the
out
scene.
altogether. What I mean, what they could, I mean, if they wanted to do this, what they could have done is had this whole street because this is all a set anyway. That I think they set up in Indonesia. Have this like around the corner from the house and the train station not that far away
Mm.
from the house, so that she could just go wandering, so she could walk back, so we could get all the street vendors and stuff like that. Because I like that stuff. That part of the scene is actually pretty cool. But the implication is that they drove a far away to get to the boat club, and then they went. Then she was with her cousins, and they could be in the middle of the city. Who knows where they are in the middle of the city? Um, and then she's supposed to find her way back. Um, so
Yeah, and they've established up to this
right.
point that she clearly stands out
I mean,
like a sore thumb.
she's wearing a shirt that
They've
has
already said
Jersey
that
on it. So
multiple
it's like
times.
yes, it's like she's not trying to blend in. She's also has the jeans and everything. So yeah, they suck as cousins. Uh, but yeah, but it's very colorful and that's I mean that I would say that the cousins could be cut out of the scene, but I do appreciate the sights and sounds stuff because they're even their history lesson was a little weak. So like if just seeing the sights and sounds was enough, and I think they could have cut them out of this scene. Um, the guy haggling with her on the picture. Oh, by the way, this QR code gets you a free copy of the comic book. I think it's the comic book where she actually goes to Pakistan. Where she goes to Pakistan. So I can zoom in here a little bit. If you didn't get it in the episode, to get that.
They've apparently been doing
Yeah.
that in every episode where they'll hide a QR code.
Yeah.
And you can download the
It seems
free.
like they started to do it
that's
in Moon
pretty
Knight,
cool
and
that they're doing.
they or at least they had the idea in Moon Knight, and they're going to continue to do it going forward. It looks like, yeah, this guy's directions.
That is again, it's like it's the most kind of South Indian way, being like, take a left here, and then leave 2 turns, and then there's gonna be like this guy that's fixing shoes, take a right, and then there's a donkey. I mean, it was
like a
it
right,
was
but not too much of a right, a little right. Like, go left.
I wouldn't be able to find it. I would have been lost. I would have been like,
yeah.
can I write this down somewhere? Or
She still found it.
Yeah, she still found it somehow.
Yeah, she sees her like gotta roll her eyes at the end of this, because and her expression is awesome. Yeah.
She's so
the
good.
Scene with this guy, I forget what his name is. I'm sure.
Oh gosh, I just wrote down Red Dagger.
Yeah.
Forgot what his name actually is. I know he goes by Comey.
Chemo, yeah.
Or Chemo, sorry, he goes by Chemo.
Yeah, on the beach scene, which again we can get to that, but also something that could have been cut. So it's like for me anyway. This scene, it worked. Yeah, there's Ant-Man. I think
there's Ant-Man
also
again.
One of her favorite people. I don't know. I feel like this scene seems weird to me. Like, how does she know? How does he know that she's a Jinn? Like they didn't really explain that well, and then
Well, he said he sensed her newer energy. That was the explanation. They kind of
he just found you. Yeah, but how?
I don't know how.
Because he seems very human to me. So how do they have a Nor detector? They didn't really. He didn't say we detected either. He said he sensed his. So like
fair. That's a good question. I don't know.
I liked a lot of the action in this, but it made no sense that they fought and then she immediately was like, "Oh, okay, I'll just go with you into your secret lair or whatever." They're fighting each other. I mean, this whole scene was coolly was staged very well. And you got to actually see her getting a bit better with her better with her powers. But yeah.
But yeah, at the end, it's like, okay, here comes another stranger who's talking about Aisha and the bangle. And the last time you did that and you went with them, they pretty much tried to kill you and your family. But she kind of goes with him again. I like the action. I think it's also like cute, like flirtatious kind of, back and forth between them, which I think is also in the comics. I haven't read this one yet, but I think he is a love interest in the comics too. So I think they did a good job with just the fight scene. But yeah, she kind of goes with him again, and in my mind, I'm like, did you learn nothing from your escapades with the clandestines of just blindly trusting somebody and following
Peter Parker
in a town that you could know anyone
with love interests as well. So she's 16 years old. Peter Parker is 16 as well. He had multiple love interests.
I mean, she is collecting a lot of love interests. She has like four. She's like three boys now.
And Peter doesn't do it only with a love interest. He gets he fully trusts Mysterio.
Yeah,
hook, line, and sinker.
So they did this cliche thing where they're fighting and they kind of fall on top of each other, but they also do a bit of a twist here that I appreciate, where her powers maintains the halal gap that we're talking about. So, so that
Well, they PG rated, you know, and
yeah.
like you know,
Yeah,
they can't be
so-
like overtly about it, you know, like
Yeah,
they did
yeah.
in movies. I think
Yeah.
it was one with Black Widow and Banner from Age of Ultron. I remember that. So can't be that over, you know.
Yeah, and Josh Whedon made Gal Gadot, so like he did it inside of in Justice League as well, but Gal Gadot wouldn't do it, so they had to get like a body double. It was super creepy. It was super creepy. It was super creepy. I'm glad that they decided to do it a different way here. It was very, very cool. But yeah, her walking away with him made no sense. Made no sense. Their lair looks cool though. Their secret lair. Like I think this is the first. So cool. Besides Tony Stark, this is the only people that have like well, I guess unless you count like the Wakandan like whole nation, but like the secret lair looks really cool here. I'm not sure how it was breached so easily later on in the episode by the villains, though. I mean, it seems pretty well hidden. Maybe they're tracking the bangle. I don't know. Yeah, they came through the roof.
They came through the roof.
Right.
But I mean, it's a roof. It's a not well hidden within the city. But yeah. But okay. What?
Yeah. Yeah, there's obviously going to be some history, I guess, between the Red Daggers and the clandestines. I don't know if they'll go into it or not, but there seemed to be, because even in the fight scene later, when Najma and Waleed kind of meet face to face, it doesn't seem like. Right. It seems like they've met before.
I like this guy. I liked his performance. Apparently, he's like a famous director.
He's a very famous Bollywood actor, director, everything. Farhan Akhtar. So yeah. So I think he did a great job.
I didn't get that. I was
like,
he's
really
dead, leave him.
Just
I'm
like the Grand Inquisitor.
Is he really dead? Come on. Yeah, I know. It's like
it was a bloodless death, and I'm not sure if it's a bloodless death because it's Disney or because he's not dead. I don't know.
I don't think he's dead. I think he's gonna come.
If the Grand Inquisitor and Reva can get impaled and come back, surely a stab in the shoulder of this like a guy who knows about multi-dimensions.
It's a different universe.
If he died, that would be kind of weird, you know. It's like, come on, he died because of that. Come on.
Yeah. So we get this is the info dump, like at least the part of the information that they have. So she does learn more about the clandestines. You get this map of the Noor dimension, and unfortunately they also have like the end of the world stakes. Like I feel like this didn't need end of the world stakes in it, but whatever.
Yeah, they could have made it smaller. To be honest,
we didn't need the end of the world. I mean, I feel like in every show doesn't need like the hero to like save the world. It to be important. Because like if the other issue is like if any of these people ever slip up because the other heroes don't know about it, like because it's not like
That's the thing, because I'm like, okay, then shouldn't Doctor Strange be here if there is a dimension going to destroy ours?
I think they were trying to kind of hint at the fact of what came up in the Doctor Strange movie, like about incursions. Like it would destroy our world because that dimension would collide with our reality. But yeah.
So one quick question about that, because when I saw this, I did. Like you said, I did go back to Doctor Strange, and I'm like, wait, is dimensions and multiverse different though, right? That's
I
that's
had
like
the same
different because if you
question.
have
I had
if your dimension comes over the other dimension, that's not technically an incursion. An incursion
Well,
is like both realities coming together, clash together. They didn't really.
yeah, they haven't defined the difference
I
between a dimension and a universe very well, but technically they're basically the exact same thing. Other realities are closer to our realities. Like in other universes are closer to our realities. Physics and specifics. But if you get further out of and further divergent, I think that's where you get the dimensions. I had a long conversation with my wife about this like last year before they even had Loki. But yeah, dimensions and universes, I think even in physics are basically the same thing. So like actual physics. So yeah, I think it's a different dimension, but it's also technically a different universe. That's just wildly different than our universe.
So technically, this could, if the clandestines succeed, it would be an incursion.
It would be an incursion. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah. Okay,
yeah.
understood.
I had the exact same question. I'm like, I think they're supposed to be the same thing, but like because they purposely said multi-dimension instead of multiverse, I was like, is Marvel this making that distinction?
Yeah.
So,
They,
but
they, they do
it
need to
doesn't seem to be
clarify
the
that
case, I
in like a
guess.
drop of dialogue in one of these things, maybe in the multiverse of not the multiverse of madness, the quantum mania or wherever
Yeah.
dimensions and things. Because this also came up in Shang-Chi. Like they're in another
Right.
they're in another not universe, they're in another dimension. So it's like it's
Right.
wildly different
Yeah.
than our dimension. So like they're um but it looked like in the multiverse of madness that America Chavez was in
Mhm.
another dimension as well, and then she started hopping to other universes that were very similar to our universe. So that was a little a little weird. And in the first Doctor Strange movie, he goes to multiple dimensions, including the dark dimension where Dormammu is, and at the end of the Doctor Strange movie, he goes to the dark dimension as well. He goes to the dark dimension as well with Clea, I think her name
Mhm.
is. Yeah. So
Yep.
yeah, they need to define or be clear about. Just like they dropped a bit of dialogue in Endgame and explained how branching timelines work. They need to do a very similar thing in one of these movies, so they clarify. Yeah,
Yeah.
Maybe Loki season
yeah,
2 or something, because that's
Yeah.
so much about like
yeah,
timeline TVA. That seems like on a platter
Yeah.
they can just
That
explain.
that would that would probably be the. I think you're right, Priya. I think that would probably be the best thing is that they're anchoring it with Loki,
hmm
because that's where the branches came about with when what happened at the end of Loki. So this is why Spider-Man happened, Multiverse of Madness is happening.
hmm
So I think that you're right that they could get into it, and we've been kind of anticipating where all these kind of phase 4 in terms of interconnectedness of everything, where phase 4 is heading, because some people are like saying, oh, it's not kind of a mess right now. We don't even know what the overarching story is. And so, I
hmm
think that there were hints in Doctor Strange, in the second Doctor Strange movie about incursions. It could be something that they're going to announce probably next month, or during the summer they'll probably announce some type of grand plan, like they did with the Infinity Stone. So this
yeah,
could be, yeah, the incursion could be the main piece of it, and Loki season 2 would be a great spot for it, because that's what ended up happening with all the multiverse stuff that's been happening with the other movies so far.
yeah, yeah. Um. So yeah, this scene is good except for like I said the dimension addition and the incursion addition, and then we kind of jump to a scene that is annoying because it includes the
Yeah.
clandestines. Like the scene makes no sense whatsoever. Why is there only one guard on these people? How like if they were going to escape, they should have escaped in transit. They're actually in this maximum um um security facility that is supposed to hold enhanced individuals, and they escape so easily. This scene made no sense. Like I said, whenever these people show up, the episode, the episodes get dragged down. It made no sense whatsoever. Yeah, this.
In my spoiler free, when I said the odd scenes
Yeah.
here and there, this was the top of that list of just scene. It's just so out of place, but it also makes no sense whatsoever. If they were able to produce their weapons all this time, why wait until you're in this situation to do so? It really just felt very kind of convenient parallel, but not in a way that makes the villain seem more villainous.
It just seems
makes
like
it
bad
seem
writing
more
that takes you out
questionable.
of the episode. Seems like lazy writing that takes you out of the episode, and then they get to Karachi, I guess, pretty quickly as well, which is also a little weird. So yeah, I mean, it's not really clear where this facility is, but I don't know. You assume that it's in the U.S. So yeah, just skipping over that. It's not a great scene.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only big takeaway from that is that the mom leaves Kamran behind. That's kind of the big takeaway is Kamran has chosen his side.
So I don't know if he gets to Karachi, or if he's going to be in Karachi in the next episode, or the next time we see him is going to be in Jersey, because I think we're going to be in Karachi in the next episode, and well, in the past anyway. So yeah.
Yeah.
This conversation is another great conversation between her and her grandmother as well.
I think that's my favorite scene in this episode. Is going to be this.
It's in the backdrop of this is actually a bunch of people flying kites, which is a very specific cultural thing that they added here, which is a beautiful. It's a beautiful scene. So yeah, and you also, I part of the reason I didn't like the last episode is because it didn't have as much whimsy, but you sort of, now I understand why they were doing that. Like, as like more real things are happening to her, she's not having these flights of fancy and imagining as much animation. But as she gets some answers from the Red Dagger people, she's starting to like reconnect with her whimsy. So like she sees this text message and it shows up as the kites in the air, and that's really the only flourish that we see here in this episode. So yeah, this is probably I mean, it's probably my favorite episode too. But I mean, I really like the conversation that Muniba has with her later on also. Yeah.
I think it's just like the line that she says of like my passport's Pakistani, but my roots are in India. It's just kind of like it defines so like what so many people went through because of the partition. And again, we did say how much they lean into it, but she is the character that kind of personifies a lot of that. And it comes down to the whole identity issue and just 20 million people displaced and having to just like force to leave their homes and have this like massive refugee crisis at, you know, the fall of colonialism in India. I mean, it's an insane topic to talk about in the MCU, but I think this scene is just so beautiful. And it really moved me just hearing about her crisis of identity because of this historic event. And I also thought it was hopeful to hear like, I haven't figured it out yet, but I have time to do it. And I just think it's a really nice message. And like you said, Colin, you know, it's something you can identify with. It doesn't mean you like live in that historical context or like know of the cultural context, but this whole question of identity and the fact that we still have time to figure out who we are, that's something anybody should be able to really relate to.
The next scene is the beach scene, which, like I said, is for me is disposable. I'm not sure how you guys felt, because I mean a bunch of more bad actors showed up. So,
oh gosh. think they're just trying to show like
Sure.
normal teenage life in Pakistan, and again, I think they're trying to show like the love kindling thing
I
between Chemo and Kamala. So I think it was more just like
I
that,
understand the purpose of
without moving the
this
story
scene.
along, really. But
They
yeah,
should have cast better people who could actually
yeah.
act the scene, though.
They don't really
Yeah,
speak.
but
One guy's
like the
mostly
people
just
that did
singing.
do
Come
speak,
on.
they did just like acting. Acting isn't just when you're delivering lines, though. It's also how you hold yourself in the space, and act. They're just like very uncomfortably holding themselves in the space, even when they're not saying anything. It's obvious like they're not actors, and depending on the
Mhm.
director, you can get really good performances or really good film out of non actors. But like this wasn't directed by sorry, who directed Eternals? I forget her name off the top of my head.
Chloe Zhao.
Chloe Zhao. Like Chloe Zhao is used to filming people who are non
Yeah.
actors, and like, but I don't know if this director is, and I don't know. It just looked weird, and yeah, they could have cut this from me, or cast people who could act. So uh, yeah, and then we get the scene with her and her mother, and you can see the kind of the struggle that she has with her
Mm.
mother. I think the struggle that they both really have with each other, trying to kind of figure each other out, like kind of circling around each other. They obviously love each other very very much, but they have a very difficult relationship because her mother her mother believes what she believes, and as much as she loves her child, like she loves her father as well, right? And her father told her this thing about her mother, and she's gonna hold on to it because that he why would her father lie to her? So yeah, this is a beautiful scene, but it's also a little heartbreaking as well. So yeah, it was a good scene for me. Um,
No, I think so too. I think it's like we were saying earlier, so much of this episode and so much of the story is around mothers and daughters, and this is another story that's really kind of unfolding. And both of these actresses just kind of knock it out of the park in this scene. Um, and just kind of like all of the weight they're carrying, but how they're
mhm.
so steadfast in their beliefs, right? Muniba is like, this is what I went through, and Sana is like, well, that was my story because I believed in those like fantasies, and now you can see why in those first episodes why Muniba was so much about bringing
Right.
Kamala down from her head in the clouds, because she's seen kind of that effect with her own mom, right? So you kind of, I think it really kind of gives you more deeper understanding of Muniba. And I love the scene right after that she
Yeah.
has with Kamala where she's just eating the sweets, because you can see like she's had a weight kind of lifted off just by having, because we were talking earlier
Hmm.
about having that conversation and sharing your feelings. And I think this conversation was a bit of
Hmm.
a breakthrough for the both of them. um, and because of that she's able to reach out more to Kamala. So I just think it's
Yeah.
like just a really
But
nice
does
kind
it
of
really
thread.
happen as often as it should? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, probably not.
Probably
That's the
not.
unfortunate thing. Hopefully it will inspire people, not just mothers and daughters, but like sons and fathers, sons and mothers, any type of family dynamic that's out there. Encourage that type of communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that as I was thinking about this is in the moment is that isn't discussed, but is sort of discussed, is kind of is the influence of the fathers here, because not just not just I forget the grandmother's name because I keep saying Nani because that's just a name for grandmother. Her father, but also Maniba's father, because he left, right. So like they
Hmm.
both are,
Yeah.
they're sort of both defined by their fathers in a little way, in a way that definitely contributed to her feeling like she was an outsider, and leaving. So yeah, it's interesting here. Um, what's being said and what isn't being said in this scene.
Hmm.
So yeah, the scene with Kamala in the next Um, the next scene is also like you said, pretty sweet. Eating toffee, and it's super hard, and yeah, it's a sweet little scene. Um, and then we kind of run into, and it's like the rest of the episode is just like one long action scene, and some of it works for me, some of it doesn't. Like, I mean, she's trying to get better at her powers here, and then and she also gets like a traditional piece of clothing here that I think she's going to put into her eventual her eventual suit. But yeah, and then they crash in and kind of ruin that. And I don't know. Does he get stabbed in the shoulder?
I think it was the shoulder.
Or was it
at the end? Yeah, at the end. At the end, when Najma kind of like stabs him, it looked like it was a shoulder. Maybe maybe it's a little bit like in the back, but
So.
But I think I would be interested if they are going to keep this Red Daggers thing. Then it just kind of comes out of nowhere how they know so much about everything conveniently for Kamala to have that exposition. So
explain.
I hope they at least. So we don't need a lot of the episode to kind of talk about it, but they don't mention it at all, right? And the one person who could have apparently dies. I don't know. I don't know how much Chemo knows or not, but yeah.
So this scene, like I said, some of this is good. Some of this chase scene is good, but I feel like it goes on a bit long. Like they actually spent some money on this. Like they crashed a bunch of stuff that they had to pay for. This doesn't look like CGI at all. I mean, until she starts to do some CGI stuff.
Yep.
But I assume that they flipped a real truck here, even though the CGI here, like they flipped a real truck here. So you see her trying to use her powers in more interesting ways here. So all that stuff is good. I don't think after that they needed to continue the chase. Like all of this is all of.
Yeah, it was really extra because he's like, whatever you do, stay on the bike, and then next scene they're off the bike and on their feet. So it just seemed like a very dramatic thing to like decouple the bike, only to then fall off it immediately.
And then this part I guess is okay because you get her in the truck, but even her in the truck doesn't really last that long. We do get a bit of a callback to her reversing instead of going forward, which was funny. I mean, she ruined this guy's day.
Yeah, you feel kind of bad for this.
Yeah,
yeah.
Totally.
I feel bad for it. It reminded me of the My Cabbages moment from.
So I mean, she uses this truck to like hit someone, and then she jumps out of it. It's like, I don't understand the point of that. Like, why not you? Cause I thought when he was running towards the truck, he was going to get in it, and they were going to go away.
Get in.
but
That would make too much sense, though.
But she gets
that
out
would
of
make
it.
Too much sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, if they were going to have her, like, I like the comedic beat of her going backwards and kind of like sort of ruining that guy's day. But like, if they're going to have her get in the car and go away from the people who are trying to kill you, like if you're not going to have her do that, don't have this in here. Just like the motorcycle stuff, don't have that in there. That's why I said I like some of this stuff. Like I like the initial chase, and then they start doing nonsense stuff and making this longer than it needs to be. And so, yeah. Then I think it starts to get, I guess, good again when they go inside, and then she actually starts to fight them.
There you go.
That's where he was stabbed in the back. Oh, yeah. I think regardless of whether or not he was killed here, she does throw him over a balcony. So maybe that's how he dies. This stuff is huh? What'd you say?
I said it wasn't that high, was it?
It was like 2 stories up. I mean,
okay, then he might be dead.
He might be dead, but like,
but he might have some magical stuff to say no, he's not dead.
we have to help him. He said, Kamala,
That's true.
it's too late. I don't know if it's too late. Like I said, like you said, he didn't fall from that far, but I do.
That was really odd that they decided to leave him, considering like he's pretty much their leader. Very, very, very odd. Also, is it just the two of them? Is it just Waleed and Kimo?
It's
who
not
are part
clear.
of the Red
It's
Daggers?
not clear
Who, like that? I was like, where's everyone else?
Yeah.
Why aren't they coming to help?
This scene, parts of it are good. Kamala parts is good. But again, the enemies are not really attacking in very interesting ways. Their weapons look weird sometimes and not real. But I do appreciate them how they are showing her getting better at her powers. He kills one of them here, so they're not like invincible. Even if they have super strength. And also this is the other part that makes them not great villains, because it's unclear what their power set is, right? Like he just hits him with 2 daggers in his back. If they have super strength, you would expect that wouldn't necessarily kill him. So okay.
Mm-hmm. They don't age Nathan. That's their superpower.
But in the previous episode, one of them like tried to hit her and he missed and he cracked the ground. So like, I mean, if
yeah, it's unclear. I guess but I guess they're still mortal in the sense like that guy killed him with daggers. Like we've been saying, the villains really for me, I'm like meh.
Yeah, I mean it ends interesting
fine.
though, because we get her being sent back to India, in the past, and it actually they changed the color grading on this, so it actually looks like a different era. And it seems like she's gonna be there. She's just gonna be there. In the next.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's 47, and it's that train that was the last train to get out of India. But it made me think whether when Sana, her grandma, was saying, I followed the stars, maybe Kamala herself is the one.
Into another timeline. It's not a different timeline, because Kamala was always there in the past, and Kamala always helped her grandmother see the thing. Otherwise, this would, based on the low-key logic, would create another timeline. Her being so
Fair.
So yeah, I think we'll see more of that. They're definitely leading into the partition stuff, which I appreciate.
It is harrowing though. I think like this shot, especially as they ended, that they just zoom out and they just show like these people. I mean, it's a really harrowing thing to again kind of visualize and see.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll get more of that in the next episode, which is I think will be really really interesting in the next episode. And like I said, that episode is written by one person, so hopefully that will help. And have less clunky things that were inserted in the episode. So and since they're in the past here, they're going to be covering some very serious stuff. So hopefully they actually handle it well. But I think they've been handling the cultural stuff by and large very very well, because it's actually written by people who are from that part of the world. So yeah. And that was pretty much it. We talked for an hour and a half about this episode. I think partly because we had that 20-minute conversation at the beginning, which was that ran long. But yeah, they also redid the closing shots by superimposing all the comic stuff on buildings in Karachi, which is pretty cool. And also they added stuff like so I don't even know what this is called in India or Peck, huh?
Rickshaw.
It's a rickshaw. Yeah, so like when I went to Vietnam, they call them tuk-tuks. Not Vietnam, and also Thailand. They call them tuk-tuks. Yeah. Um, so yeah, you're starting to see also. It was mostly images of Miss Marvel, the Miss Marvel comics, but now you're starting to see a blending of like images from the show as well, like the Tuk Tuk here. You see, this is from the comic, but you see this is from the show. Her mask in the show. Um, so yeah, it's I think they redo the ending credits for every one of these episodes, which is cool. Yeah. So all right, I think that's pretty much it. We talked about pretty much everything in the episode. Do you guys have any other final thoughts?
No, I'm pretty cool. I think I'm looking forward to the last two episodes that are going to be. I think so far so good. It's still ranked number two, I would say, even though there's been some weaknesses in the third and fourth episode that you pointed out. I think overall number two so far for me.
I think because of the weaknesses in the second and third episode, I think it's probably number two for me as well. Hawkeye is probably number one for me. I know, Colin, you said Loki is number one for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very bold. I didn't expect
Bold choice,
that.
Nathan. Hawkeye is number one.
Yeah.
I did not expect that either. I would definitely go Loki as well, and then WandaVision as my second. So
I enjoyed Hawkeye. They definitely they used a bunch of tie-ins to our larger MCU more effectively. Like you saw. You had Yelena show up, but you also had Kingpin show up, and you're going to get a spin-off show from that. And he is one of the original Avengers, so I wasn't expecting to like Hawkeye as much as I did. But I don't think that I think there were definitely weaker episodes, but I don't think that Hawkeye started as like strong as this episode. But I think, in general, consistently, all the episodes were above a certain level. For me anyway. Yeah.
I agree.
I think I would put Loki still at my top, but I would put this probably at par with WandaVision so far. I'll be curious to see kind of how it all comes together at the with the final two episodes. But so far, I think it's been really strong. I do wonder how they're going to unpack that mysterious line that's on the bangle. What I wrote it down. What you seek is seeking you. I don't know how they're going to circle that square, but
I mean, maybe they're talking about her great grandmother, Aisha. Maybe she's still alive. There's another shooter drop about why Najma thinks that she was betrayed or whatever.
Now she's in the past, so maybe she'll be able to actually see great grandma in the past.
Yeah, maybe. So I guess we'll see. I'm interested to see what happens in the next couple episodes. Especially, I guess the penultimate episode almost always is like. It's almost always going back to the past, and they're literally going back to the past. They usually go back to the past like to unpack some things. Like WandaVision, there was like flashbacks, and now they literally put her back in the past for at least portion of the episode. So yeah. So looking forward to what they do next week with that. All right. If there's nothing else, so that's what we think. We are interested to hear what you guys think. So comment down below, like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next week. All right, guys. Bye. Thanks.
Bye, guys.